us, like Nader's rating, Rager? Nader's rate, wait, here we are, the miss, continue. All right, I have to continue because I can't see you. And there were others, there have been others, of course. But I think of all the sound people, all the people who did any technical stuff, you personified the Seegers-Rader tradition too, in terms of your intentions to that transcended the music itself. And you saw it as a dynamic in society that was transformative. And you look like you're 12 years old, which is really disgusting.
All right. So I'm gonna attempt to go live now. Bear with me.
What, John?
I'm gonna attempt to go live now, so just give me a moment. Brad, you still with us, sir?
I'm with you there, John.
Right. And someone might be echoing.
Well, we can take off we can mute our microphones unless we're speaking.
Yes. Perfect. All right. Give me a moment here, and we're almost there.
Where are you, Bill?
I'm right here.
No, I know, but where is here? Are you in outskirts of New York or somewhere in Virginia?
Oh, that way. I'm at Merrimack, Mass.
Oh.
Near the ocean, Merrimack River, and New Hampshire.
That's fantastic. Right. How old are you?
83.
I'm going to be 82 in a few days. So, but
Hey,
you're catching up to me.
I am. The difference between us is minuscule. David, how old are you?
I'm 76.
Baby.
He's a
I'm the baby.
John's the baby.
Right. Well, John is our child, you know.
48.
Right. How's Paul?
Where are you, Peter?
No,
Where
Paul
are you?
Stuckey is fantastic. He's as strong as an ox and dedicated as he can be, and the two of us are closer than we ever were.
Great.
It's a wonderful thing. We miss Mary, of course, but we've kind of incorporated her into our moments when we perform. So she's with us. She was a piece of work.
Great piece of work.
Yes, she was a great piece of work.
Where are you, Peter? Where in the world?
I am 3.5 hours north of New York, in the Schoharie Valley, which was the breadbasket for the Revolutionary War. It is a very depressed area, and my daughter found a place here 20 years ago. She's turned into heaven, and it was so depressed that she got an extraordinary place, literally on the side of a waterfall that is 150, 125, 50 feet, and it's a sacred place. And she's an activist beyond activists. I can't even begin to tell you.
Great.
It's in the blood.
I'm sorry.
It's in the blood.
I'm sorry.
If not in, no, I say it's in the blood, if not in the genes.
It's in the blood. The apple's not falling very far, yes.
And the genes fit her very well.
Yes, I think so. Are you aware of her work? Bethany Yarrow?
No, I'm not, but I'm going to become.
Well, yes, David, I'll tell you what. Send me your email. I will send you a couple of things, that'll blow you away. And you too, Bill. You're not going to believe it. I do these broadcasts. I've been doing them. I've done about 35 since the COVID crisis, mini concerts that were supposed to be 40 minutes and they turned into 2 hours, which is par for the course. And one of them was on Mother's Day, and it was about Bethany, and it started with her singing at Standing Rock in one of their official videos. And then we showed her video that she made in South Africa which, David, you would not believe. It was at the time, in 1992, at the, the height of the transition to the non-apartheid world. And she went down there, and between junior and senior year, on a fellowship, she made a film called Mama, A Way to Power to the Women that'll blow you away. Very proud daddy.
Love to see it.
Okay, I'm just letting the room load. Now we got people kind of coming in, so
The room is loading.
the room
Is
is
that a vernacular for some inappropriate behavior?
absolutely not.
Look down and load it. That's the word.
Yeah, right. Let's see. We're live on Facebook now, and there are folks who signed up for this event, so I'm sending them the message, and then they're coming on.
Right.
Just takes a little bit of navigating. So
I sent it out to, a couple of thousand people.
I saw that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was very, I knew that. As a matter of fact, you know who's tuning in? Paul Prestipino. Do you know who he is? Paul plays the mandolin, the banjo, the guitar, the harmonica, all of these instruments, and he did so with Peter, Paul, Mary for the last 15 years of our career. And he also, and this will interest you, you know the truck, the recording truck that came out of, what is that recording studio where the Beatles recorded?
Abbey Road?
No, the one in New York where John Lennon did. That truck, Kuster's truck, he was the tech guy both at the recording studio and in Kuster's truck.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, he's a master in these ways, but he's also a masterful musician. And so I made sure that
Oh, good.
he was informed. Actually, Tony Ranzo did, who works with me.
Awesome.
He's the greatest.
Good.
David Marks wrote the song Master Jack in South Africa.
Aha!
Three Jacks and a Jill, right? Three Jacks and a Jill?
Four
Jacks and a Jill. Four Jacks and a Jill.
And Trini Lopez. Trini Lopez had a big hit with it.
Yes. Well,
yes.
the room is still loading, and what I'm gonna do is just run through my introductions and then give kind of a brief. I'd like to dedicate this this show in a special way. I think it's kind of
Hey, thanks.
What a great Bible that is.
It is the Bible.
Did you see the picture I sent you?
Yeah, that's great, Peter. Thanks, man. Doesn't get any better than that. But it's call it a sad coincidence that here, and David, I'm not sure if you've heard in America that the careless, senseless, cruel act of this gentleman by the name of George Floyd was, yeah, it's just so horrible. And then here we are, talking about these issues and how much has really changed is open for discussion, so we could maybe kind of relate to.
It's no easy walk to freedom.
Say again, Peter?
It's a long walk to freedom.
Yes. But here we are with this show on this topic, so it's just kind of mind-blowing,
It is, and it's a completely schizophrenic world.
It is.
We have the privilege of talking like this. If we were African American, we were walking down the street, you'd be in grave jeopardy.
True.
In so many circumstances. And we would be, multiple times more prone to contract the virus.
Yeah.
Good point. Bradford, you still with us?
Yes, I am,
Okay, good.
John.
You want to say something, or before we begin, or?
Well, I became involved with Bill's work in 1969 when we were organizing this massive demonstration at the Washington Monument, anti-Vietnam War demonstration in Washington Monument, and we were talking about the logistics of it up in New York City in the committee, and we were wondering who would do the sound. We knew it was going to be an enormous demonstration, and we didn't feel that the sound people we knew had experience in such big demonstrations. Well, Cora Weiss, who was a New York City activist, was part of our group, and she said, well, we need to get Bill Hanley. And we said, well, we didn't know Bill Hanley. He said, who's he? And she said, well, he did the sound for Woodstock. Well, that wasn't much more. We didn't need much more of a recommendation than that. I immediately got in touch with Bill, and he was kind of hard to find because he was traveling around with these two semi-trailers with his equipment. But I reached him, and he came to Washington, and I met him there. And then we went to the different venues of the demonstration, and he discussed what he needed and putting up his equipment and everything. And from then on, he simply took it over and did everything. We got some of the permits in Washington. And that was how I became acquainted with Bill. And then there was other demonstrations after that.
Well, Bradford, let me, and that's all. I want to deep dive back into all of what you just said, and thank you very much. Let me give some proper introductions as we move forward with this. I guess you would call it an online talk show. I don't know what you call it, but we're getting the message out to the people through this technology that is, I guess, helping us stay connected in some way. This show was inspired, which I call the Quarantine Sound Sessions. This show is inspired by selfless kind of plug here, The Last Seat in the House, my book, newly released with the University Press of Mississippi. And I thought, well, how do I keep the conversation going since we're suppressed and we're all inside about my book, which normally Bill and I would have went out and went to bookstores and did talks and all these things. So this is, I think, our 6th or 7th show. So far, people have really liked them. And we just keep the ball rolling with it, with new and interesting topics relating to the book and this very important history. Anyway, to move on with introductions, I want to thank our panel tonight. If I didn't say, my name is John Kane, and I will be moderating this evening. I'm the author of The Last Seat in the House, The Story of Hanley Sound. And Bill Hanley is with us. Bill is an American pioneer audio engineer and is regarded as the father of festival sound, most widely known as the sound engineer and mastermind behind the sound reinforcement system at the Woodstock Music and Art Fair, Bethel, New York, and countless other festivals and anti-Vietnam War and other protests of that nature. So this show's topic is about demonstration sound and about activism and the movement. And now we have many movements, of course, but what it was like to project or to have sufficient sound, and how important good sound engineering, the technique of good sound engineering, was to get the message out, and that sort of thread. And we have Peter Yarrow, who's an American singer and songwriter who found fame with the 1960s folk music trio Peter, Paul, and Mary. Yarrow co-wrote with Leonard Lipton one of the group's greatest hits, Puff the Magic Dragon, which was, I mean, if you were a child and didn't love that song, I don't know what. I remember you being in preschool loving that song. But also he is a political activist and has support all his life and has supported liberal causes that range from opposition to the Vietnam War to the creation of Operation Respect, an organization that promotes tolerance, civility in schools, of course, the civil rights movement. Bradford Little, and if I've missed anything, these are just summaries, so it's not just me talking for 3 hours. Bradford Little is with us. Hello, Bradford.
Hello there, John.
Bradford is an American pacifist and peace activist. He was an organizer with the Committee for Nonviolent Action in several major campaigns against militarism, including Omaha Action against land-based nuclear missiles in 1959, Polaris Action against submarine-based nuclear missiles in 1960, the San Francisco to Moscow Peace Walk at 61, and the Quebec, Washington, Guantanamo Peace Walk in 1963, and several other major, massive anti-Vietnam War marches beyond that in Washington, D.C. Also, please, if anybody has any projects they'd like to plug for this during this program, let me know. but Bradford has a newly released book called Now to Autobiography, Peace Activist, the Autobiography of Bradford Little. It's on Amazon right now. David Marks is with us, former crew member of Hanley Sound. He's currently in South Africa joining us. He is a songwriter, singer, producer, music archivist, and publisher who's been a member of the South African music industry since the 1970s. And he spent much of his early years of his career mixing, recording, releasing, and archiving broad cross spectrum of South African music. Also, most notably, his song, which he penned, Master Jack by Four Jackson and Jill. So I'd just like to open up this this forum with maybe, Peter, would you like to open this up with a song?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, I think this is about that. You know, it's about the song. You know,
Yeah.
the song as a vehicle for the message.
Right. Well, the first song that was sung at the March on Washington in '69, and I'll give you a little bit of history. Well, let me just say this is the first song, and then I can tell you, if you like, how who the performers were and what its intention was, and how it was that this conjunction took place. But this opened it up. At the time, this was thought of as a song. All will be well when the day is. Now this is where you have to sing along with me. I can't hear you, but you can sing. It doesn't matter if we're not in sync or not. And if you can't remember the words, I'll tell you what they are. The first line at this point is, day is done. The next one, surprisingly, is day is done. The third one is, day is done. And the fourth one is, day is done. Okay, with me, together. Day is done. Again. Day is done. Again. Day is done. When the day is done. Again. Day is done. Day is done. Day is done. When the day is done. That is a marvelous cacophony. Tell me why you're smiling, my son. Is there a secret you can tell everyone? Do you know more than those that are wise? Can you see what we all disguise, my son, through your loving eyes? Here we go. And if you take my hand, my son, all will be well when the day is done. And if you go to David, take my hand, go ahead, David. All will be well when the day is. It's your solo, David. It's your solo, David. It's your solo, David.
Go ahead.
Last time, day is done. With me now. Day
is done.
Yes. Day is done. Day is done. Now, let me just tell you, I wrote this for my brother when he received his draft notification. And it was intentionally. It was a song of solidarity in those days. And it did climb the charts. But the reason that it was meaningful, oh my God, there must be, oh my God, I'm ready. The
Cell phone.
technology is beyond belief. Okay. All right, this phone goes off. I love it. Okay. So the
Wanted.
so the I knew the audience knew it because it had climbed the charts a bit, and everybody did sing. And as Bill knows, because our history goes back to the early 60s with the Newport Folk Festival, where
Yes.
Bill, at the time, he did the sound, which was extraordinary for what was a landmark event in the United States that was the crystallization of the folk renaissance and brought together mostly uh, traditional players like the moving Star Hole singers in Mississippi, John Hurt, and the Georgia Sea Island singers, and the clog dancers, and and the blues singers par excellence. There were the people that brought in the crowds, and that was Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Judy Collins, Peter Paul and Mary, etc. But the emphasis was on the discovery of this extraordinary music that on whose shoulders we stood. And Bill had to pass the test of having exquisite sound because he had some of the great ears listening, notably Albert Grossman, for instance, who respected him extraordinarily, although, Albert could be a little bit off-putting at times, but I know that he absolutely thought you were the best. Bill Lee, by the way, who's the father of Spike Lee, was the bassist for everybody. He was a jazz bassist. And he played with Peter Paul. Everybody played. And he backed us all up, and he was amazing. And this song, which started in 1969, now that was a march for 500,000 people. And what we would have at Newport was nothing like the 500,000 people. I mean, at the time, the reason Cora Weiss told you that was it, because she asked me, because Cora and I fundamentally put that together. I asked all the performers, and I wanted to be an expansive group from all corners of the musical world. And Bill had to do the sound for the Cleveland Symphony Orchestra Quartet, for the cast of Hair, for Earl Scruggs, for John Denver, for Mitch Miller, Pete Seeger, Peter Paul and Mary, for they were all the kinds of music very intentionally. The statement was that all the world of music not only wanted to end the war and insisted on ending the war, but insisted on creating a moment where we lived that reality with the music. There were almost no speakers, and yet that march, Bill, is credited with being a very important moment, bringing on the inflection point when the United States, on balance, turned against the war in terms of the vast majority of the population, having that opinion rather than supporting it. And from what we know, from the biographies, for instance, McNamara's biographies, that when they heard this music in the Pentagon, in the White House, and they saw 500,000 people. You saw John Denver singing Last Night I Had the Strangest Dream, if you remember, and a pan on CBS across this 500,000 people, the largest demonstration in America to that point. Now, Cora Weiss, she's been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, and we continue to be very close. And she was, quintessential activist, as are you, my friends.
Let me ask you something, Peter. And excuse me for asking.
No, please.
When did it become apparent that the music of Peter, Paul, and Mary might be a representation of the movement? When, for you, did your art become a vehicle for change? When did you realize that? I mean,
That was,
oh, yeah.
it was before we were even known. Mary was brought up in the domain of Pete Seeger. She was part of the Song Swappers, a teenage group that recorded 2 albums called that you can find at the Smithsonian. One of them was Bantu songs, and the other one I forget what it was. And she was on stage with a group of teenagers when Mort Saul was on Broadway, and she grew up in a very left-wing home where Paul Robeson actually sang lullabies to her. And so when she came to the group, she was already deeply, deeply committed to the music and to the ethic and to the idea of what Pete Seeger and the Weavers. By the way, she was at the Weavers concert in '55 at Carnegie Hall, where Harold Lowenthal bought the place out because they were on a blacklist. Nobody would hire them. So he hired the hall. And that concert that I was at, Tom Paxton, we didn't know each other. I wasn't to meet Mary Travers until 5 years later. That was 1955.
Right.
But I came to it with that same perspective. Noel Polstucki did not. He didn't know folk music at all when he came to Greenwich Village. He knew jazz. He was a comedian. He did classical music, but he brought it into his heart. So Mary and I were the political kind of, music is not entertainment. Music is cultural workers. Music is Pete Seeger, the Weavers. It is the mechanism whereby hearts are brought together and wills and hopes and dreams are expressed, and the capacity to accumulate this kind of momentum with hearts attached to one another and resilience that comes from it. And Noel grew into it, but it was, you asked the moment where it became apparent, that was when we sang at the March on Washington in 1963. And that we sang Blowing in the Wind and If I Had a Hammer. And If I Had a Hammer had broken through on the charts and was the first song in that era that was absolutely political, or what did I say, cultural political. It was about values. It was about, the word justice was there. And it was a monster hit. And then the song that introduced Bob Dylan to the broad public reached its peak on the charts the week prior to the August 28th March on Washington, where Martin Luther King delivered his I Have a Dream speech. So when the group sang, along with 250,000 people, something transformed in all of us, where we knew the answer to your question, which is, we knew that our music could make a difference in this way. And that's why we stayed together for almost 50 years.
Yeah, well, I mean, if anybody knows the history on that and has watched enough of the archival footage, you'll know that you wanted to be introduced specifically, not as entertainers, on that march. Ossie Davis, of course, introducing you, and how significant that was. In relating to this, because this is 1963 and this is August of '63. You're talking about that march. That summer, of course, Bill providing sound reinforcement at Newport. In many ways, it begins at Newport with Pete Seeger, the Freedom Singers.
Freedom Singers, yes.
Freedom Singers.
There's Josh. There's Theo Bikel, Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, the Freedom Singers, Peter, Paul, and Mary standing on stage. See, and there was a controversy about that, Bill. You may remember, because there were George Wein was initially reluctant to make it that outspoken a political statement, but there was no chance that we weren't going to do it. and he embraced it. But there was, you know, are we music? Are we music, or are we a political forum? And frankly, you know, the fact of the matter is that I say this all the time to people. It's important. You know, when you go to a concert for 5,000, not a half a million, you know, you're seeing specks. What your contact with people is sonic. And so my obsession with sound, which Bill will attest to, was satisfied by the skill and the caring and the extraordinary creativity and the cutting edge knowledgeability of Bill, not because it was loud, not because he never had that kind of, you know, mid-range blast that excites people to dance. For when you heard Bill's sound, you heard the words, unless Bobby Dylan was going electric, in which case.
I don't want to bring that up. That's a whole other
Bring up
show.
the hammer.
The axe. Get out the axe. How, you know, and Bill, you could answer this question too. You know, how important was Pete Seeger to this, the origins of this, coming out of Newport, inspiring a whole new generation of folk singers, moving into these large demonstrations and marches. Of course, Pete was present at many of them, but this newer generation of folk singers.
Immensely important.
Yeah,
Immensely.
yeah. He was a good
I
friend.
love him.
We should dedicate this show to Pete Seeger as well.
Oh, he was it.
Yeah.
He was the pathfinder, along with the Weavers, you know, and whatever, but it was Pete.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Peter, you have been known, because I've done a lot of interviews, and your name comes up with regard to sound. In particular, Bob Jones reminded me of how finicky you are about sound, and that I think that's very interesting because, you know, some musicians just want other people to deal with it. You know, they don't want to deal with the sound in a personal, intimate way. But you know, Paul says, oh, Peter will walk the room. He'll tune the room. He's on it, you know. And of course, when Bob Dylan goes electric, you're right there on the stage, you know, kind of marionetting the instruments, making sure no one, you know, everybody's in tune and in line with.
Not in tune. What it was the following. We did not have monitors that were in any way comparable to what bands have when they have drums
Right.
on stage or electric instruments.
Yep.
So what we did was set the levels for the amplifiers to a certain level so that they wouldn't feed into the vocals and wash out the vocals or wash out each other, because what you had in a recording studio is you try and reduce all the leakage of one instrument into another. Now, inevitably, there was more than you wanted. But what I did was I said, this is the level. I took the level. I went up there. At the time, I was doing the mixing. As Bill will remember, I would mix most of these festivals at Newport, because it was my passion. And the word finicky does not describe. It's like saying today, oh, that doctor is really finicky about his mask.
Yeah.
Come on, for me, the sound was our tool.
Yeah.
And to have a partner in that who totally was ahead of the game. He was putting up microphones up there that just, you listen to those recordings.
Yeah.
Did you hear the Peter, Paul, and Mary at Newport 63, 64?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
PBS special? I mean, my God.
Yeah.
That was unbelievable.
Yeah.
What kind of mics were those? They were condenser mics that you had, right?
Well, some in the beginning, I'm trying to think. Let's see some pictures. I changed over to some Shure and some EVs, and your choice of what you wanted to have for a microphone.
Yeah, but generally you were hanging these
Were
U47s.
Sheps, and
The
they
Sheps, right?
RCA.
Yeah, it's amazing. and the sound that was going on.
Stereo mix right there.
Yeah, that's right.
Peter, as the Newport festivals grow, and of course the popularity of certain artists grow, the demonstrations grow, the issues escalate all across the world, in particular the United States, and the Vietnam War and the civil rights movement. So many various issues people are angry about. How was it? Just like when you merged or gained a partnership with Cora Weiss and Bradford Little, was it just natural for you to choose Bill Hanley for?
There was nobody else to work with. There was no choice. I mean, I told Cora. I mean, that was my domain, and of course, Cora would have shared that information with Brad. But that's what I knew. That's the stuff I knew. What she put together was the whole constituency, and Brad put together was the whole constituency. How did we get 500,000 people there? How did they have phalanxes of people from the unions between the stage and the place where agent provocateur might create serious trouble? It was a massive 6 months undertaking of constant work. And when I think of the people who developed the energy for something like that to happen, it is the Plowshares, it is Phil and Barrigan and Liz McAllister, it is the Plowshares, it is these, and still these people are and going to jail for their commitment to commit acts of civil disobedience.
Yes.
Because their hearts break. Because if they don't, they will suffer from what is called moral injury, because they are watching something happen that makes it impossible for them to say, I cannot live in this circumstance and watch this happen. I will not see the world destroyed. And there's history of people who have done this. For instance, Tim DeChristopher, who inherited that legacy and went to federal prison for 2 years because he stopped an auction near near Salt Lake City, near Arches National Park, of federal lands that were just, being given away in the last days of the Bush administration as a gift to the oil and gas folks. Then he went in, he started bidding, and he didn't have any money. And $1 million or $2 million later, he was, up for being a felon. And he refused. He said, no, I want to take it before the American. There's a film called Bidder 70. That was his, because where did these people come from? How did we have these people there? What was it? I'd like to have a little discussion about how that happened, because I think it's important for people to know this stuff doesn't just happen out of thin air.
Right.
There's blood on the tracks. There's heart and soul. There are people who have died to make this stuff happen.
Yeah, much risk, putting your name on the line, sacrifice. And I Bradford, I hope you're listening in still, sir.
Oh yes, I'm listening. I'm inspired.
Oh, good.
By bringing back all these memories and all of these wonderful, courageous people who are involved in those movements.
Bradford, maybe you could talk about your relationship with some of these people relating to Mr. Yarrow and Mr. Hanley here, and how difficult it might have been, or how dangerous it might have been to even participate setting up a sound system under such duress. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, this is one of the reasons that I was drawn to admire Bill's work, because he was able to improvise under some extraordinary circumstances. I think in '69, the demonstration ended up with a tear gas barrage by the police, which dispersed some of the people, and of course affected Bill's crew too. But they kept working and did their job. And then I remember the demonstration in 1970 after the invasion of Cambodia, the one at the Ellipse, in which Bill put up a sound system. He was told that the demonstration was going to be at the park on the other side of the White House. And so that's what he came down prepared to do. But then the place was changed to the Ellipse, and he had to immediately change where he'd put up all this equipment. And he'd ordered a cherry picker, a crane, to help lift up these huge bass speakers onto like scaffolding. And the cherry picker didn't arrive. So how are you going to get 700-pound bass boxes up to the top of the scaffolding? Well, Bill did it by creating a staircase out of scaffolding, and then recruiting a number of these young people who were in the audience, and they simply rolled these huge boxes up the scaffolding to the top and set them there. And I watched this whole operation with absolute astonishment, because it represented amazing engineering and ingenuity and improvisation. And it worked. It got it all working on time, and we had a fine demonstration. I think Jane Fonda was there and spoke, and a number of other people. And this is the kind of relationship with Bill's work that just fascinated me, because I was into logistics. And then another demonstration, it was 1950, no, when was it? In 71, the May Day demonstrations in Washington, with this huge civil disobedience demonstration involving 13,000 people and several venues. There were 3 or 4 major sound venues, and Bill had equipment in all of them. And in all of them, there was a great danger that there might be an outbreak of some kind of police violence and use of tear gas and things of that nature. I remember Bill went to a friend of ours who was had a lumber yard in the Bronx, and he got hundreds of panels of plywood and put it in his trucks and brought it down and set up the plywood around the meeting place. And this was very useful. It kept the crowd in one place, and he put that up. He improvised that in the moment. And I just, I watched this and participated. Well, I didn't participate, but I helped arrange for the permits and things like this. I just got to know Bill better and better, and he told me about sound equipment and how to make it work and build it. And this always interested me, and I've created my small own miniature systems, which I've used in Chicago mainly since then, and all based upon equipment which he recommended. The Shure microphones, for instance, the Amplifox amplifiers invented by Dan Queen, a prominent audio engineer. I got to know Dan quite well. And all of this I became involved in through my acquaintance with Bill. And it's part of my involvement in the whole peace movement during that period. And it was really, there was no money involved. I never made any money working on these demonstrations. No security, but the wonderful people you get to know, and to be involved in perfectly important humane movements, anti-war movements, anti-racist movements, movements for social justice, which give you a sense of tremendous purpose when you're working this way. This is the kind of background I had in getting to know Bill Hanley, and it's been one of the richest part of my life ever since.
That's great. Well, Bradford, you know, go ahead, Peter.
When did I go to jail? When I was
Pardon? Well, I got thrown in jail after the 71 demonstration. I don't think Bill did. Didn't you? You never went to jail, did you, Bill?
Yes, I did.
You did? When was that?
Cost me 10 grand.
Oh my goodness. Which demonstration was that?
I think it was the Washington
71.
71.
The May Day demonstration, yes.
I think so.
I mean, when you went out on those fields in Washington and demonstrated at that time, you were running a considerable risk. You could easily get beaten up and thrown in jail or worse.
I think that it's fair to say what sound engineer of that day not only could have done the job, but would have actually put themselves out there to do something like that, to take that sort of risk. I think very few, if not any. But on that note, I want to show a clip. This is Brad. Yes.
I was going to say, Rhoda had a little story she could throw in here. Go ahead.
John, do you want me to tell it now or afterwards?
I mean, it's up to you. It doesn't matter, I don't think.
Well, this was, I don't remember what event it was either, but it might have been on the Eclipse. I'm not sure, but I remember the concert went on for.
Oh, that was getting up in the morning?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
So
at the Ellipse.
it was at the Ellipse, and I think it was Bill Oakes' last performance too. And Bill had this big car, like one of these Buicks, that was like it was like a bed on four wheels. You could just sleep in the front seat and the back seat. It was so comfortable. So whenever we would do jobs, you know, if we couldn't get back to a hotel, we just slept in the car. So I went to sleep, and he rolled in something like 6:30 in the morning, and I decided I was going to go for a walk around the site, you know, to see what was going on. And there were all these kids there, and they had their teepees, and they were cooking their rice, and they had their wine sacks and everything. And the smoke was going, you know, from various different reasons. And it was very, very nice. I just wanted to see what the crowd was like. And I turned around to go back to the stage, and lined up on the street, there were like 100 guards with their
100. There's a lot more than that shoulder to intimidate us.
And they're just lined up, and I thought to myself, oh my God, they're going to gas all these kids. So I get in the car and I start shaking Bill, and I say, get up, get up. He says, what do you want me to do? And I said, do something. Just get up there and go talk to them. I don't get, you have to just, so he gets up, you know, he just got like an hour's sleep. And he gets up and he goes out and he talks to one of the officers, and it turns out that it
was Smith. I think it was Smith.
Bradford.
Assistant chief. Go ahead.
And they just said, like, well, they said you didn't have a permit, and Bill says, of course we have a permit. But if I hadn't gone, if I hadn't gotten Bill up, and Bill hadn't gone out and, you know, settled this thing with all those police or whatever you want to call them, or, you know, yeah. It was horrible, and the whole audience would have been just tear gassed. So
he had a tank of gas that was about 2.5 feet long and about 4 inches in diameter of tear gas. I told him I'd hold it from him. He was climbing over the fence to come backstage.
Thank you, Rhoda. Fair to say, these were, I mean, you were setting up sound equipment and dealing with some very serious situations. And that's in the, I think that story's in the book. I believe that story is in the book. Your story, Rhoda, is with regard to the oral history. Yeah.
It was quite the morning. It was, I mean, yeah. Anyway, sorry to interrupt what you
didn't interrupt. You didn't interrupt at all. You didn't interrupt. So I'm gonna show this clip, Bradford. I'm sorry that you can't watch it, Brad, but this is your footage from the. It's amazing footage from the May 9th, 1970 Moratorium Day student strike, and it's actual footage of Bill setting up, walking these massive speakers up scaffolding with his crew. And I was told that even you'd pull volunteers from the crowd, and it's really incredible footage. So I'm going to roll that now and share my screen with you guys. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit with David Marks, and then Peter, maybe you can sing us out with a tune, and we could take a couple questions and finish it out. Is that all right? Okay, good. Bear with me a moment.
This is the Ellipse in Washington, an oval, grassy area just south of the White House, where a crowd estimated to be 75 to 100,000, almost all of them young students, have gathered to make known their feelings against the war in Southeast Asia. And the official atmosphere in Washington today is in marked contrast to the large anti-war moratorium held on November 15th. Let's go now to Washington and NBC correspondent Sander Van Oker.
Frank, you said a moment ago that it was about to get underway. It is underway right now. It was supposed to start a little earlier than this, but the crowds have been so enormous that it's estimated now that's more than 100,000. It looks to me like it's in the area of 200,000, and they didn't expect this many, that the people like Dr. Spock, who is the chairman of this day, had a hard time getting up to the speaker's platform. There have been speeches. They are getting a little more passionate right now than they were before. I think the tone was set for the meeting by a man named Ron Young, who is the chairman of the mobilization group that put this all together in about 7 to 10 days. And Young said that this demonstration was different from past demonstrations because the students were coming here today not believing that this demonstration would end the war. They have been that route before, he said. October 15th, November 15th. No, that is not enough, he said. He said that the students have to go into the offices of Congress, stay on in Washington, to try to make the congressman end the war. The point about this crowd, as the November 15th crowd, I think, is that it is essentially, from where we have been standing here for the last 5 hours, essentially a very peaceful crowd. The one thing that's remarkable about covering these young people is the sense of peacefulness and well-orderedness that they have. You'll see medical teams go in when someone faints. The crowd will rise immediately. They'll bring the stretchers right in. It'll all take place in about 3 to 5 minutes. There are observers here formed by the former Attorney General Ramsey Clark to circulate around to make sure there are no incidents. If there are, to report them in case of further legal action at some later date. And what they're worried about at this time is not so much what's going to happen between now and, say, 4 o'clock, but what is going to happen at 4 o'clock when the crowds start to move out and disperse. If you remember on November 15th, that's when the trouble began, when some of the crazies and the violent members of the SDS and weathermen went to the Justice Department for a demonstration which did erupt into violence. But so far as we can see right now, this is a very peaceful crowd, a very well-disciplined crowd.
Pictures that there was a cross that had been erected on the Ellipse. And we have a report here that it is a wooden cross, and that a Negro man carried it to the area, and at his own request was strapped to it. He's identified as Daniel W. Billings, Jr. of Cincinnati. And in explaining his action, he said that black and yellow people are being crucified around the world. And he went on to say, we just want peace and brotherhood. So if we see that shot again on the screen, we'll know what it's about. This is the largest demonstration, of course, in the country. There are other rallies being held in other parts of the country, and for that matter, in other parts of the world. Sandy, we got a report from London just a little while ago saying that, and I should emphasize that this was in London now, not in Washington, in London. 50 persons were hurt when about 5,000 anti-American demonstrators broke through some police lines outside the American embassy in the British capital. According to the reports, the crowd hurled sticks at the police, and they shouted, "Kill Nixon, the U.S. pig." But that was in London. Excuse me. As you can see, much of the afternoon will be taken up with speech making there at the Ellipse, and we'll be dropping in and out of there in the rest of the remaining portion of this hour. But as we noted earlier in the morning, President Nixon, I think it was around 5 o'clock, was it not? Around 5 o'clock this morning, said he couldn't sleep. And he got up and took his Cuban-born valet with him, and they made a dawn visit to the Lincoln Memorial. There were only 3 Secret Service agents with him. The president said the Secret Service agents were quite alarmed, petrified, as a matter of fact, is the way he expressed it. And at the memorial, he spent about 45 minutes talking to some students who were also there. The president later said it was one of the most interesting experiences of his life. There were, of course, no cameramen and no newsmen, and the president later went to the Capitol.
Yeah.
Nice.
Peter. Right.
Say, honestly, in retrospect, I think it's inappropriate to focus on the danger to all of us. I think we were young, we thought we were invincible. The danger, if you were in the middle of the civil rights, for instance, 64, in Mississippi summer, when Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner were killed, the danger, yeah, we got, threats, and we did, but we were basically joyously affirming what we believed in. There was no fear in these gatherings until something would happen. And I think that it's important to dignify those people who really lived in danger by noting that the risks to us were not great. The risks that were taken by the people who committed civil disobedience, where they went to jail, but I think upon reflecting, this was a time in which, by the way, the Kent State events just took place, and John McAuliffe, who was one of some of you might know that, we had a gathering of this sort to talk about it from people of the time who experienced it. It changed with Kent State because people who were supposed to protect the people, National Guard, fired on students, and all of a sudden, over 900 universities said, we're not continuing business as usual. We're going to have teach-ins, but school is over. It is still unimaginable that our National Guard would fire, and they did at Jackson State.
Yeah.
It was a different circumstance, but people were also killed there. And now, as you said at the beginning, we are living in an era where this picture of this young black person and the policeman kneeling has gone totally viral. So we have to be advised that we are, as we reflect upon this time, we are living in a far more precipitous era where everything that we fought for, every sound that has been brought into the hearts of people to unite them by Bill Hanley's expertise, by everybody who has been involved, is in jeopardy. We are sliding to a place where there's such a divided series of information that people absolutely are not living in the same reality, and when division like that occurs, it is reminiscent of the Nazi playbook. And it is very, very, very scary because things can happen now where, first of all, they're denied, they didn't happen. You know, nobody got shot. You're looking at the picture of it. No, no, there's no danger. There's no danger from the COVID. You know, this is a hoax. And when we have this kind of situation, what we're doing now, I think it's incumbent upon us to realize that we, again, must come together in our septuagenarian, octogenarian, with our energies, and realize that we cannot turn away from this. And looking at these pictures, which are so incredibly, seeing Phil Oakes there, and Jane Fonda, and seeing Coretta Scott King, and you realize that these are giant cultural, political figures, and we have to stand on the shoulders of those events now and realize how critically people have to know.
It's a complicated question, and one that probably can't be answered in detail or analyzed and assessed in one or two sentences. But why, in your view, if you can't answer it, no big deal, but why are there no protests of this magnitude any longer? Why aren't people gathering in the masses, collectively angered by the injustices? And Bradford, you can chime in on this as well, sir. But you know, what is it? What is it about today?
Well, I think everybody should answer that, and then I'd love to answer it too. Bradford, do you have some thoughts?
Well, I think that there's a spirit of resistance in the country still. There doesn't seem to be one issue around which you can mobilize these very large demonstrations, but there's a great deal of local protest and resistance going on, smaller groups, coalitions being formed. I find a lot of vigor out there still, and it's absolutely necessary because the Trump administration is, I think Peter stated it quite clearly, it's verging on Nazism, that type of totalitarianism and fascism and racism and violence, and it has to be opposed. The only way you can stop it is by getting out publicly and opposing it vigorously. And I'm glad to see that much of the media is doing it. I watch CNN constantly, and they're doing it. New York Times, I think, is working on it. And so I don't think it's a situation like Nazi Germany exactly, but you can't allow yourself to fall into complacency and overconfidence at all. We have to get out there and work and struggle and support each other and encourage each other, and to make sure that the values we fought for back in those days are maintained and improved upon. And you know, I'm 92 now and half blind, but I certainly still see the importance of that kind of struggle, and whenever young people come along who are doing it, I'm greatly inspired by it. And the place of music and sound reinforcement is very important in what's going on now in different forms, big and small.
Well, I wanted to say that I was filming Bill, working on this documentary, and I think it was last year, Bill, or last spring, or the spring of 2017, where Bill was yet again at a protest on Cambridge Common, working the console, and his crew, his son and friends, other engineers were setting up speakers, and the journey continues in the you know, that sort of flag is still being waved. I think Bill's still very much passionate about these issues, and on that day, I remember, you know, it was incredible because I know Bill's history, and I'm thinking, like, here we are, 2017, you know, and we're dealing with many of the same issues that we dealt with in the 1960s and even before that. But David Marks, as we segue into how Bill had evolved in his career, and there were other marches in the United States that Peter and Bradford were involved with Bill Hanley in. But Bill, after Woodstock in 1969, at some point, you leave the country, go back to your homeland of South Africa, and there's a communication with you and Bill that you're looking for sound equipment to support concerts in your area.
Integrated concerts.
Integrated concerts, correct. So can you talk about that, David, and how that conversation began and what you did with that sound equipment?
Yeah, well, as Peter said, it's sort of frivolous for me to mention, you know, us making music or making a joyful noise when the other side of the tracks, there were people dying, but we didn't know that. South Africa was an incredibly strictly segregated country. And I think only in hindsight do we understand just how effective the nationalist Afrikaners, or the fascists, who were the very minority, by the way, they weren't the majority in South Africa, and they had the iron fist, but they had the legacy of the Nazi ideology, and they clamped down. They made the townships in South Africa were still today are like concentration camps. I mean, that's how they were designed, to keep the labor forces away from the white cities and to provide a pool of cheap labor for the gold and the diamonds, etc. The minerals that made South Africa very wealthy. And there we were making music. But I really, what Peter said earlier really struck a chord. You know, the music itself, we felt too, how can I say, we felt guilty as white suburban people to go out there and make a noise, a joyful noise, without recognizing or acknowledging that there were these great divisions in South Africa that need to be bridged. But we couldn't, unlike the United States, we just couldn't go out there and organize a demonstration. You wouldn't be able to leave your house and there would be repercussions. So the only way of doing this was ironically, through sound. Well, not ironically, I mean, that, in other words, sound reinforcement. Make it loud, make it big, so that we could attract more people into one area, but from different cultures, as it were. And you had to do it as a music event. We couldn't do it as a political event, because then, as I said, it wouldn't even have begun. So, you know, to cut a long story short, what we did was we arranged these free concerts on private property at Wits University. And we found out through the student lawyers that if you have a concert where you don't charge and you don't pay the musicians, then you're not breaking any law, provided it's on private land. So we managed to get into the campuses, similar to your universities, where the young people, well, us at that time, 70, 71, 72, were active, but didn't really know how to get the message across. But to get the message across, we had to bring people together. How do you get them together? So I invited groups from Soweto, Mamelodi Township, from the northern suburbs of Johannesburg, and we just said, look, let's put on a free concert on the library lawns. Who's going to stop us? And this we did. And it took place over many years, but in the end, we were getting 10, 15,000 people of every culture imaginable. The very people that our government at the time was saying couldn't get on together. And that's what the sound systems did. They just really brought people together. And Bill's insistence, and I remember Dave Fries, I had a conversation with him and with Judy on the phone. I was in Johannesburg, they were in Boston, Medford, saying, look, it's important that if we send you the system, that it's not used for segregated events. Now, technically in South Africa, that's impossible because the entire cities were segregated into these camps. So the only way to get the people out of these camps was to have a joyful occasion and to play the music. And that's how we managed to integrate them on many levels. But it was nowhere near, looking in hindsight, what some of the struggle liberation people were going through. So we can't make any claims for being a champion of anti-apartheid activists. Our role was very small, but the role of the sound system in bringing people together was profound. And again, Bill, you'll never know. I mean, I'm going through John's book. Sadly, I just can't read it. I never put it down, but I have to go from one chapter to the next and I have to refer back. It's like a Bible, you know, so.
Did that on purpose.
Yeah, gosh, I don't want to make divisions like, start a religion here, but it's important for me to look, and for the young people who are researching my archive now and researching your work. And I did send you one of the papers, by the way. I sent you a young student's PhD, a young Muslim student, by the way. So it's important for us now to look back at this legacy and understand where it comes from, and that we can today proudly build on that legacy, but we can't make claims about standing in the firing line, as it were. And then just to finish, Peter, I've just finished a song that has a line that reminds me so much of what you said, and that is, music is the sound our feelings share, a heartbeat in time to who knows where. So the music itself is what is the glue or the attraction, and the sound reinforcement, the acoustic guitars, not the loud. We thought we would conquer the world by being loud, 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 and turn your amps up to 11. It didn't work like that. We had to be more gentle, more open, and reinforce the inner feelings of the young musicians who were so frustrated, because being a musician in the first place shows that you're a concerned person. And as you say, it's not entertainment. It's sharing ideas. It's making people aware that there are people who aren't well off as we are, and let's bring them together. And the only way of doing that is with music and sound. So thank you.
Nicely put.
Well, that's so beautiful, David. And if you want to look at the awareness that has grown in America now of what an essential worker is, where the people who are putting the groceries on the doctors, the medical people, the awareness now that we're kind of celebrating is the essential workers of those events, without whom we could never have done that. We couldn't have had the March on Washington in '69 without Bill. And if we didn't have the gutsiness, and Chip Monk, for instance, was another one who did the lights at Woodstock, and he was right there. He lives in Australia now, I believe, unless he's back here.
Right.
But you worked with him, and he was there in that same sense that you were. But he was in the lights, and I remember seeing him at the Village Gate when he was doing lights for Nina Simone. I mean, he was They were like fluid things to him in the sense their sound and their sound. The sound that Bill Hanley did was nothing like the sound that you hear in a discotheque. Nothing.
Yeah.
It had the intimacy, it had the warmth, it had the detail that allowed you to feel the soul of the musicians. And in answer to your question, John, I'd like to say, you said, where is it happening? First of all, number one, it is happening when you have, millions of people, mostly women with pussy hats on their heads all over the place. Yes, it's happening. When you have a March for Our Lives from sparked by the students of Parkland, with whom I have been, it is happening, but it's not happening the way it should be happening, and there's a reason for it, because music that we shared was was for us kind of a sacred kind of entity, and it was not subject totally to the bottom line of the dollar. You get people like Mo Austin, and you just who the Warren Brothers are making a lot of money, but that wasn't they would nurture the career of a Randy Newman for several albums, and they believed in this stuff. They were more proud of Peter, Paul, and Mary's participation in these things than they were. They never dissuaded us from going. They said, if you go to this Selma Montgomery March, you will lose your Southern audience. And indeed, that's what happened to a large degree. But they never opposed it. Those were the essential workers in that regard. Now, the problem is today is that for several reasons, music as a binding force, as it existed then, and proceeding into the Beatles, etc. This was not only that music of that time and the folk music, it proceeded into the other arenas. That has music of conscience. Tell me the song that is the equivalent of Blowing in the Wind of the last 30 years.
Never.
Everybody knows it. What is the equivalent of Where Have All the Flowers Gone? Yeah. Where is the equivalent of the kind of performance? Yes, there are pockets of it, particularly in hip hop, but it's not. It has fallen prey to the very reason that the United States is doing what it is doing, because of greed, because of avarice, and because of vast inequity. And for that reason, music of conscience has been marginalized. Frankly, if you know something, this is a build it and they will come, and hopefully we will be able to do that, because I will tell you about this, where the Parkland students went down with activists. There were 12 of us, not to write songs, but to help them write songs, their own songs. These are students who, if they did not see their fellow students killed in front of them, their friends did. And the trauma to them, we know from 20 years from Columbine, it's lifelong. And in order to survive, what they need to do is what you needed to do, you people who would go and get arrested. You say, I can't live with myself if I don't make a civil disobedience gesture. Well, these young women, and mostly young women, made an incredible album and these songs, and you'll be hearing from them soon. And then we've got, from a group called Braver Angels that are trying to depolarize America, realizing that if we are this at each other's throats, the reason that it's not happening is because the music itself is not thematically committed to what you were committed to, Bill, what all of us on this were committed to, which is that music is primarily, not completely, but primarily in one of its most noble forms, a way of people finding a mutual embrace and believing in each other and strengthening each other, as we did at the March on Washington, which is why it was so powerful, and the other marches. And I believe that it's build it and they shall come in this case, because if we can get the music written by the kids, the climate by the the Greta Thunberg and these Parkland students. And this is that we have to look forward to it. And to the women. It is the women and the young people. And for this reason, I want to sing a song that was written by a wonderful activist by the name of Anne Feeney. And this is a song that will go to the hearts of all of us. Was not sung in any of these. It was written far more recently, but it's great. And it does tell the story. Was it Caesar Chavez or Rosa Parks that day? Some say Dr. King or Gandhi that set them on their way. No matter who your mentors are, it's pretty plain to see that if you've been to jail for justice, you're in good company. Have you been to jail for justice? I want to shake your hand, 'cause sitting in and lying down are ways to take a stand. Have you sung a song for freedom or marched the picket line? Have you been to jail for justice? Then you're a friend of mine. You law-abiding citizens, come listen to this song, 'cause laws were made by people, and people can be wrong. Once unions were against the law, but slavery was fine. Women were denied the vote, and children worked the mines. The more you study history, the less you can deny it. A rotten law stays on the books to folks with guts to fight it. I said folks with guts to fight it. Have you been to jail for justice? I want to shake your hand, 'cause sitting in and lying down are ways to take a stand. Have you sung a song for freedom and marched the picket line? Have you been to jail for justice? And you're a friend of mine. Well, the laws were made by people. No, the people are but when the system fails, it's up to us to speak our piece. We must be ever vigilant for justice to prevail. So get courage from your convictions. My convictions. And let them haul you off to jail. Have you been to jail for justice? I want to shake your hand, 'cause sitting in and lying down are ways to take a stand. Have you sung a song for freedom or allowance to make it lie? Have you been to jail for justice? Then you're a friend of mine. Have you been to jail for justice? Then you're a friend of mine.
Bravo.
Hey, I love that.
Excellent.
Excellent,
So
excellent.
I've got to get the words of that.
I'm going to, David, I'll get your email from John,
Please.
and I'm going to send you some stuff that's going to just
Please.
really unite us, the spirit. And now, how old are you now?
I'm 76, yeah.
Oh, that's right. You're just a baby.
Yeah.
I turn 82 in a
But
few days.
sorry if I might just jump in, Peter.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you would be on this panel when my daughter asked me to please sing a song on, we do this songs via the cell phone. And I sing a song, I like Freight Train. So I do Freight Train, and then they write their own verses. And so we communicate like that. And one of the songs I used to sing my children 50 years ago was Puff the Magic Dragon, of course.
No.
Yes, of course.
No.
I've been singing it for my children. I know that. It's the same with me and Master Jack. No, please. But no, they love, what I'm getting at is that songs like this that you've just sung, and the one that I put up by Jesse Winchester yesterday as well.
Which one was that?
These are songs, the Oobla-dee song, the Shalala song
Yes, yes, yes.
of Jesse's. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, Jesse Winchester, isn't that so? Great song by him.
Oh, lovely. But what I'm getting at is that the young children, they are more spiritually aware, I think, than we believe. And when they hear songs like this, they get so excited. They want to learn them. And I'm talking about children, my grandchildren are 15, 12 years old, 8 years old, who really get involved with the music. And they are subject to this doof, 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 doof. But they prefer these lovely lyrical songs so that they can get their own words in and their own ideas. So I'd love to play them that song, if you don't mind.
Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do a little bit of it, but I'm going to do a different version. Puff, he loved Hanley Sound. He loved it very much. He knew that if he didn't have Bill Hanley, he'd be out of touch with the state of the art, 'cause that's what music needs. And that's what puts us together, and that's how our souls get freed. Puff the Magic Dragon said thank you to you, Bill. He said thank you, and our cups you did fill. And thank you, John, for writing the book, The Last Seat in the House. Does that mean that you want good sound for the last seat in the house? I assume that's what you're referring to. And that's not the end, because we'll do a proper chorus now. Puff the Magic Dragon lived by the... Where's your harmonica? Frolicked in the autumn mist in a land called harmonica.
What key?
It's in G. Oh, he's getting his G hard now. These guys have 8 or 10 instruments. Thank you, John, for doing this wonderful book. Thank you for having this program and for letting us have a look at our own history together. This is so fine. And David Marks, now it's your turn, and it is no longer mine.
I've never played it with the harp.
I love it. La 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 la, in a land called Hanley.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think we made history here
John,
tonight, folks.
go ahead.
I did want to say one thing. The vehicle is music is a vehicle for change, and that's really what it's all about. There are some folks here who made some comments on Facebook, and I want to get to them really quick, and then I'll wrap this up. Brad, you still with us?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, people are saying it's great. Thank you very much. Let's see. Peter, someone says you inspired them to become a songwriter. Pamela Ruby Russell. El Salvador was a great song, someone says.
That was written by Noel Paul Stuckey, a great song.
Yep. Let's see. Someone says, please say hello to Peter for me from Carmeek Mike Stein. You tried to
Oh,
help
Rabbi Mike Stein. I mean, because
Carmeek
oh,
Mike
he's
Stein.
great.
Yep.
Yes, right, right. Oh, he's amazing. Yeah.
Yep. He said he was trying to help our band back sometime in 1983. Hello, Carmeek Mike Stein. Let's see here. Someone mentioned the scaffolding stuff was amazing with the footage.
Wow.
No questions yet. When did, of course, Woodstock stuff comes up, but when did Hanley Sound start using chain motors to fly PA? But we can get into that another time, but that was around 1969. Bill, you were using the CM winch, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Ed Blackwood says, being able to touch people's souls is one of the greatest things we as humans could ever hope to achieve. Music has frequently been a way to do this. I often think about Jimmy Valvano's quote, to me, there are 3 things everyone should do every day. And number 1 is laugh. Number 2 is think, spend time in thought. Number 3, you should have your emotions move you to tears. If you laugh, think and cry, that's a heck of a day. And I think that's a beautiful way to end this. No specific questions. Oh, here's someone. Alan Thompson says, Peter wrote a letter to the editor at the New York Times after my group Rock Against Racism was banned from Central Park by the U.S. Supreme Court. Our main allies were Peter and Justice Thurgood Marshall at the time. Peter wrote, quote, rock and roll needs its volume to convey its truth. And that's from Alan Thompson. So Alan says thank you. And on that note, Bradford, do you have any lasting comments before we, I live near the trains here, sorry folks. Brad, do you have any comments?
I'm very glad you asked me to participate because it's brought back many, many valuable memories. And I think this tribute to Bill and to all the people who engage in these struggles for peace and justice is very important. I'm glad to hear Peter singing again. And so I'm very happy you invited me.
Well, thank
it's been
you.
Very rewarding.
And thank you for becoming a friend and being so generous with your research and helping me with my project over the years. It really means a lot. And anybody else have any lasting comments? Bill, Peter, before we?
Great job, everybody.
Yeah, I'm just very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
this
you.
is good. So again, I want to dedicate. Go ahead.
Thanks. I just want to say I'm so, how can I say, proud to be in such exalted company. And thank you guys. Thank you for all you've done for the history of music and sound in this world. And yeah, that's all I can say. I'm totally gobsmacked. Thank you.
And
And John, for you getting this together, this is quite a step you've taken. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It takes a village, right? I wouldn't be able to do it without a panel of amazing guests and friends. And again, this show is dedicated to the countless individuals who, throughout their lives, have made sacrifices for causes that we've been talking about this evening, and for the family and for the life of George Floyd. The show is dedicated to George Floyd and his family. And on that note, peace and love to everybody.
Pete Seeger.
And Pete Seeger.
Pete Seeger.
Yes. Thank you, friends.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Bill Hanley, for providing the best sound one could ever hear.
Ever.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night, Bradford.
Yeah, well, good night to you all.
Night, Brad.
Keep on plugging along.
Keep in touch.
Thanks. Peter?
Oh, Peter left the room. Bill.
Okay, well, you give